Imagine sailing into battle with 4 giant aircraft carriers, hundreds of planes, some of the best pilots in the world, a massive plan, a powerful navy, and the confidence that you are about to trap what is left of America's Pacific Fleet. Now imagine losing all 4 carriers. Not in a year, not in a month, but in one battle. That is what happened to Japan at Midway. In June 1942, the Japanese Navy sailed toward a tiny island in the Pacific Ocean, expecting to finish what Pearl Harbor had started. They believed America was weakened. They believed America would react exactly the way Japan wanted. They believed their carriers would lure the U.S. Navy into a trap. But there was one problem. America was not walking into the trap blind. America was already waiting. And by the time the battle was over, 4 of Japan's most important aircraft carriers were burning, sinking, or abandoned. So how did America do it? How did a nation still recovering from Pearl Harbor sink 4 Japanese carriers at Midway? The answer is not just bombs. It is codebreakers, repair crews, pilots, timing, courage, and one of the most dramatic turns in naval history. To understand Midway, we have to go back 6 months. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The attack shocked America. Battleships were damaged or destroyed. Thousands of Americans were killed or wounded. And Japan believed it had crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet. But Pearl Harbor did not destroy America's most important weapon in the Pacific. The aircraft carriers were not there. The USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, and USS Saratoga survived because they were out at sea. That mattered because World War II in the Pacific was becoming a carrier war. The old idea was simple: big battleships would meet, fire huge guns, and decide the battle. But the Pacific was too big for that. Now, the real power came from aircraft carriers. A carrier could launch planes from far away. It could strike ships it could not even see. It was basically a floating airbase. And in 1942, Japan had some of the best carrier forces on Earth. Japanese pilots were experienced. Their planes had long range. Their naval commanders had confidence. And after Pearl Harbor, Japan moved fast. They attacked across the Pacific. Island after island fell. For a while, it looked like Japan could not be stopped. But America had something Japan underestimated: patience, industry, and people who refused to panic. While Japan was moving across the Pacific, American codebreakers were listening. Japanese messages were encrypted, but U.S. Navy codebreakers had already started breaking parts of Japan's naval code. They could not read everything, but they could read enough. And one mysterious target kept appearing in Japanese messages. It was called AF. The problem was, no one was completely sure what AF meant. The Americans suspected it was Midway, a small island northwest of Hawaii. But suspicion was not enough. So the Americans came up with a trick. They had Midway send an uncoded message saying that the island's water system was broken. Soon after, Japanese coded messages reported that AF was short of water. That was it. AF was Midway. Japan was coming. And now America knew where. This is one of the most important parts of the story. Japan thought it was hiding its plan. America was reading the invitation. At this point, Admiral Chester Nimitz had a choice. He could play it safe. Or he could trust the codebreakers and move his carriers into position. He chose to trust them. That decision changed the war. Instead of waiting for Japan to strike, America prepared an ambush. And this is where Japan's confidence became dangerous. The Japanese plan for Midway was huge. Really huge. Maybe too huge. They wanted to attack Midway Island, lure out America's aircraft carriers, and destroy them in a decisive battle. On paper, it looked impressive. In practice, it was complicated. There were fleets spread across vast distances. There were multiple moving parts. There were assumptions stacked on top of assumptions. Japan assumed America would be surprised. Japan assumed America's carriers would arrive late. Japan assumed the damaged USS Yorktown would not be ready. And Japan assumed its own carrier force would control the battle. That was a lot of assuming. And in war, assuming can be very expensive. Because while Japan was planning a trap, America was doing something very American. Fixing things faster than anyone expected. The USS Yorktown had been damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea. Japan believed it was out of action. Honestly, that was a reasonable guess. Yorktown had taken serious damage. A normal repair job could have taken weeks or months. But American repair crews did not have weeks or months. They had days. So they worked around the clock. Mechanics, welders, electricians, sailors, everyone moved fast. The ship was patched up enough to fight. Not perfect, not pretty, but ready. Japan thought Yorktown was gone. American repair crews disagreed. And that is one of the reasons Midway became so shocking. America did not just show up with carriers. America showed up with a carrier Japan did not expect to be there. By early June 1942, the American carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown were waiting near Midway. Japan was sailing into the battle thinking it would surprise America. But America had already turned the tables. On the morning of June 4th, Japanese planes attacked Midway Island. Their first strike damaged the island, but it did not knock it out. American forces on Midway fought back. Planes from the island launched against the Japanese fleet. Many of these early attacks did not hit the carriers. Some aircraft were outdated. Some pilots had little experience attacking ships at sea. Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire were deadly. From the outside, these attacks might look like failures. But that is not the whole story. Because every attack forced the Japanese carriers to react. Every attack made Japanese fighters burn fuel. Every attack made ships turn, dodge, and defend. Every attack added confusion. America was not landing the knockout punch yet. But America was making Japan work. And this is where the battle became a giant timing problem. Japanese commander Chuchi Nagumo had a difficult decision. His first wave had attacked Midway, but the island was not finished. So he considered launching another strike against Midway. That meant rearming planes with bombs for land targets. But then Japanese scouts reported American ships in the area. Now the problem changed. If American carriers were nearby, Japanese planes needed torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs for ships. So Japanese crews had to switch weapons again. Bombs off. Torpedoes on. Then maybe bombs again. Then maybe torpedoes again. On an aircraft carrier, this is not like changing batteries in a TV remote. Fuel, bombs, torpedoes, aircraft, elevators, hangars, flight decks, everything has to move in a precise order. And when you are under pressure, that order can become chaos. Japanese carriers were powerful, but at that moment, they were vulnerable. Planes were being rearmed. Fuel lines were active. Weapons were being moved. Decks and hangars were crowded. And the Americans were still coming. First came the torpedo bombers. These aircraft had one of the most dangerous jobs in the battle. To launch a torpedo, they had to fly low. Very low. And slow. Straight toward some of the most heavily defended ships in the world. It was almost like flying directly into a storm made of bullets and fighter planes. The American torpedo squadrons suffered terrible losses. Many did not score hits. Many did not return. But their attack mattered. It mattered more than they could have known. Because while Japanese fighters were diving down to attack the low-flying torpedo bombers, the sky above the carriers was opening. The Japanese combat air patrol was pulled lower and lower. Their attention was focused near sea level. And high above, American dive bombers were searching. This is the part of Midway that feels almost impossible. For much of the morning, American aircraft had been scattered, lost, delayed, or attacking without success. Then, at the critical moment, dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown arrived over the Japanese carriers. And they arrived at almost the worst possible time for Japan. Or the best possible time for America. Below them were Japanese carriers filled with aircraft, fuel, bombs, and confusion. The American pilots looked down and saw the target. In a dive bombing attack, a plane does not glide gently toward the enemy. It points down. Steeply. The pilot aims the entire aircraft at the ship, releases the bomb, and then pulls up before the ocean does the rest. It is terrifying. It requires skill. It requires nerve. And on June 4, 1942, American pilots did it when it mattered most. In just minutes, the battle changed. Kaga was hit. Soryu was hit. Akagi was hit. 3 Japanese aircraft carriers were suddenly burning. 3. In minutes. Think about how shocking that is. A few minutes earlier, Japan had 4 powerful carriers at the center of its plan. A few minutes later, 3 of them were crippled. This is why Midway became legendary. Because the turning point did not happen slowly. It arrived from the sky. The bombs did not just hit ships. They hit ships at the worst possible moment. Fuel was exposed. Weapons were being handled. Planes were packed close together. The carriers became floating disasters. And the American pilots had done what seemed almost impossible. They had punched through the strongest carrier force Japan had and shattered it. But the battle was not over. Japan still had 1 carrier left. Hiryu. And Hiryu was still dangerous. Its aircraft launched counterattacks against Yorktown. Yorktown was hit and badly damaged. For a moment, it looked like Japan still had a chance to hurt the American carrier force badly. But America did not stop. American scout planes searched. American commanders reacted. American carrier pilots prepared another strike. And later that day, American aircraft found Hiryu, the 4th carrier. This is the key detail. America did not sink 4 carriers in one single instant. The first 3 were hit in a devastating wave. The 4th fought back. But then America found it too. Hiryu was attacked, set ablaze, and eventually lost. For carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, gone. The number is hard to overstate. These were not small ships. They were the heart of Japan's carrier striking force. They had taken part in Japan's rapid expansion across the Pacific. Some had been involved in the attack on Pearl Harbor. They carried veteran pilots and trained crews. And at Midway, America removed them from the war. This was not just a material loss. It was a human and strategic loss. Japan could build new planes. But replacing experienced carrier pilots was much harder. Replacing trained deck crews was harder. Replacing the momentum Japan had before Midway was harder still. Before Midway, Japan had been expanding. After Midway, Japan was forced to rethink. America had taken the initiative. That does not mean the Pacific War ended at Midway. It did not. There were still brutal battles ahead. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. The war would continue for years. But Midway changed the direction. Before Midway, Japan was pushing outward. After Midway, America began pushing back. And what makes the American victory so remarkable is how many pieces had to work together. The codebreakers had to identify Midway. Nimitz had to trust them. Yorktown had to be repaired fast enough to fight. The carriers had to be placed in the right area. The pilots had to find the Japanese fleet across a massive ocean. The torpedo bombers had to press their attack, even against terrible odds. The dive bombers had to arrive at the perfect moment. And when Hiryu fought back, America had to find and strike the 4th carrier too. Midway was not one lucky moment. It was a chain of American decisions, skills, risks, and sacrifices that created the moment. That is why the story is so powerful. Japan came to Midway expecting to trap America. But America had read the plan, repaired its ships, positioned its carriers, and sent its pilots into the sky. The Japanese Navy wanted a decisive battle. It got one. Just not the one it expected. And maybe the simplest way to understand Midway is this. Japan brought 4 carriers to destroy America's fleet. America brought intelligence, courage, and timing. By the end, all 4 Japanese carriers were gone. So when people ask, how did America sink 4 Japanese carriers at Midway? The answer is, America listened first, prepared faster, fought harder, and struck at exactly the right moment. That is Midway, a tiny island, a giant gamble, and one of the greatest American victories of World War II. If you want more World War II stories explained in this simple cartoon style, subscribe to the channel. Because the next question is just as strange. How did America build so many ships, planes, tanks, and trucks that its enemies started to realize they could never keep up.